Okay, today I want to have a look over the Pixelhue P20-DS with some features, but basically I want to go through 10 scenarios that come up relatively frequently in the work that I do. So what we'll do is we'll quickly download the software, Pixelflow, which is how you control your Pixelhue switches, and then we will go through and in the simulator go through 10 scenarios that I commonly come across, which will start with very simple and they will go up to the very boundary of what is possible with that switcher. Go to the website pixelhue.com and then you can go to the P series and it will show you the switcher. Not a lot to say really, like you can see the P10, the P20 and you can see, yeah, over on the side lots of different pictures. That's not the DS version. The DS version is a module that has on the top. So you change the top module out for this one, or you buy it with a new module. And yeah, so let's go have a look for the downloads. So we'll go Download Center. And in here you've got all the software obviously. So we will look for the P series, and then we've got Pixelflow. There's two different ones. So I'm going to take this one. Super, and once we've got that, we can just double click and then follow through the install process. Great. Close these. Once that's installed, you can just launch it like any other application. Super. Now the first thing you'll notice is there's online devices and simulation devices. So we're going to be using simulated devices, but any real devices would show up here. You can save your projects in there if you so wish. But we're going to jump straight in and show you how to add simulated devices. So you just press plus, and then when this loads, you get to choose your device, name your device. So we'll go P20-DS. It's got a handy view of what's on the back. And of course there's no optional modules on this switcher on the P series, so basically that's what you get. We'll allow that. There we go. And then once it's started, you then have a virtual device. So you double click on that to get in to access it. So quick overview, you have some inputs over here in green, you have some outputs in blue, you have some AUXes in blue, and then you have a multiviewer here as well. So important to know is that obviously it's a 12 input switcher. So this block, although it has a DisplayPort and a HDMI, you can only use one at once. So to choose what input you use, you click on the block and then you can change which connector you use over here. When you change, press apply, it will then change the color of the connector. So you can say we've gone to DisplayPort. The outputs, although you have 4 of them, they're in 2 groups of 2. So there's a lot of different modes that you can use with the P20. So the first thing is this block here can either be one 4K output, or it can be 2 dual link outputs, or in program only mode you get 2 4K outputs. But these two HDMIs 1 and 2 are joined, 3 and 4 are joined, so they always show the same thing. There's also these outputs up here, the SDIs, which are linked. So output 1 is the first SDI output. It will only output SDI if it's a valid signal type for SDI. And then same again there. So you can get in program only mode all 4K outs over the SDIs and the HDMIs as well. If you're going into a Novastar processor, if you're going into an EDID processor, you can use the opticals. It has to be a Novastar processor. You also have to refirmware your processor with the correct firmware to be able to do this. And then basically you go optical from your switcher to your processor, and then from your processor to your LED over copper. Apart from on the MX40 Pro, where you can go fiber in and then you can go fiber out to a CBT box. So that's what that optical section is for. You can get a throwdown box as well that you can use to get HDMI back out of the system. Opticals 1 and 2 are linked with output 1, 3 and 4 with output 2, 5, 6 with output 3, 7 and 8 with output 4. And if I remember, I'll drop in a document that lists all the possible combinations of modes in how that works. Because depending on whether you're 4K or dual link, the fiber cages carry different signals. But basically when you're in 4K mode, 1 and 2 carry the left and right of your image. That's how it works. So that's that. You've got AUXes. These are all 1080p, 50 or 60 at all times. You can't go any higher than that. And you have a multiviewer as well, which is also, I think, 1080p only on the multiviewer for now. That's the back of the DS P20. The P20 just doesn't have the SDI outputs, nor does it have the Dante. So we've also got Dante here. On the P series, you only get 2 channels per connector. So you can route left and right from an input to your Dante, and you can route your Dante to your left and right on the HDMI and SDI connectors. You can't use 3 through 8 on the audio side. It's only the 1 and 2, the left and right. And also you have gen login if you need to use that. So that's the back of the switcher. I don't think there's much more we can say about that. In the simulator and also on the real box, you set your input type, connector type first, and then you click on your connector, and then here you can set your name and your EDID. That's how you set your inputs up, and obviously your information stuff you can just pull from your input, or you can manually set it as well if you need to. So let's talk about the 10 scenarios that I have. They start really simple and they will go gradually more complex up to the very limit of this switcher, and I'll show you a couple of nuanced cases when we get up to the more complex stuff. So the first show would be a pretty simple, full screen projector, full HD projector I should say, with a DSM having 2 layers, one for your notes from your PowerPoint and then maybe a timer overlay in the corner. It's very common. For input side you may have 2 PowerPoint machines, main and backup, and then you may also have camera and timer. How you get those in is obviously up to you. You've got freedom of 12 inputs to choose for 6 there, so plenty of inputs to play with in that scenario. In that scenario you may also have something like a QL1 at front house, or even a DM3 with the Dante module, and you can quite easily pass your audio off across the Dante network very simply. Now that's the simplest show. The next simple show you might have the same sort of thing, but you might have 2 DSMs, one showing a copy of the screen behind you and then one showing your notes feed. You may also have a relay screen, and you may also have another input for some videos or something like that. Getting more complex might be doing some LED in set, so you might have some custom res outputs, and then a relay screen at 1080p, some DSMs, and then also a graphics cart going off to someone who's doing some graphics recordings. That's scenario 3. Scenario 4 is maybe some LED totems either side of a projector, so projector in the middle with some LED totems, or 2 LED totems, one either side. A few different ways that this could work, but that's another scenario. Scenario number 5, this is where we start getting into the sort of more technical stuff. So a 2 projector blend in a 3:1 ratio with 2 iMac projectors, one either side showing the same thing, and then 2 DSMs. So we're going to start to fill up our connectors now, and obviously with this we've now got different resolutions. So we've got some 3:1 and we've got some 1080p coming in, so we'll look at that. Scenario number 6, we've got an LED wall that is larger than HD, so that's a slightly more complex one. We're going to be dealing with multiple formats, multiple sizes, multiple aspect ratios. That's a lot more intricate in terms of how you control it, but it's very simple to set up. And then we get into the sort of more harder scenarios. So scenario number 7 is a 4-wide blend. Not exactly typical, but quite common for some award shows. So we're looking at a sort of 5,800 pixel canvas, pixel wide canvas. 4 projectors, and then obviously DSMs, and if it's an award show, some prompt. We'll look at some cut and fill, when we get to that example, because you might want to do that on your cameras. Then we've got scenario number 8, which is a big LED wall, so 12 meters by 4 meters, 4,800 by 1,600, plus relays, plus DSMs, plus prompt. Then we've got a sort of super wide LED wall, so we're talking 20 meters by 2.5 meters, 2.6 mil, so 7,680 wide, so approaching the limit of the connector width. And we'll also look at how you might drive that into both Novastart and Brompton processing, because there's some differences there. And then the last scenario is probably the very, very limit of what this switcher can do, which would be a 20 meter by 3.5 meter, 2.5 mil LED wall, so we're talking 8,000 by 1,400. There's a lot of limitations that come into play when we get up to that sort of scale. They're limitations in so much as they limit what you can do. You can half do the show, but you would be better off choosing a different switcher at that point. So there's the 10 scenarios, and basically we're going to go from 1 to 10, and I'm going to show you how I would build them in the simulator, and we'll go from there. So scenario number 1. So scenario number 1 is a simple show. We're going to go full HD. Everything is HD for this particular show. We're going to only use HDMI inputs. So I'm going to change this one back to be HDMI. Now the thing to know about the way that Pixelhue switchers work, specifically in P series, is that the capacity of the input affects how many layers that uses when you plonk it on your screens. So because this is set to 4K, it will actually use 2 layers later on. So what we need to do is we need to change this capacity down to be dual link, which is the lowest that the P20 can do. The P10 has some single link stuff, but that's to do with the output stage, not the input stage. So basically on the inputs we can change all of our inputs if we wanted to be dual link. So I'm going to do that for inputs 1 to 4. Classic, you need to press apply once you have made that change. So input 1 should be okay, and then we're going to set up our outputs. So for this show, we've only got 2 outputs, so I'm going to use output 1 and 2. Obviously this output block at the moment is in 4K mode, so we're going to change that to dual link mode. So in dual link mode we split, so now connectors 1 and 2 are one output and connectors 3 and 4 are another output, and that's fine. We're not going to use 3 and 4, but I'm going to set them to be dual link, because if you're working in a dual link mode, you probably want all of your connectors to be dual link. You'll notice that the SDI outputs have gone red. That's because when you put them in dual link mode, the default resolution is 3840 by 1080, so the half of the 4K, which is not a valid SDI format for within Simply standards. So that is my inputs being set up, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump to screens. So you'll see in this mode I have my screens across the top, screens and AUXes. AUXes you can't remove, screens you can remove, so I can remove screen 1 for instance. There we go. Down the bottom you have your connectors. Over this side you have your properties, so you can rename stuff should you wish. And then if we move across, you've got the programming tab, which then is how we program it. Multiviewer tab is how we set our multiviewer, and audio metrics is where we set our Dante routing. So let's set up our screens. So in this scenario we've only got 2 screens, so I'm going to add screen 1 and add screen 2. So my screen 1 is going to be my projector, so I'm just going to call that PJ, and my screen 2 is going to be my DSM. Super. Now first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an output to my projector. There's that format that I said we had earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here to our output, and we're going to change our format. Now 1920 1080 is a standard format. I'm going to leave it at 60 for this example. But there you go, there's our output. And also if we change our DSM to be the same format, so 1080p at 60, I need to add the connector first, which is this connector. The labeling of connectors gets a bit weird. The naming of connectors is a bit unusual. So yes. Now something we need to talk about is this one has automatically been changed to 1920 by 1080. That is because on the P20 this block of 4 connectors must all share the same format on the connector. So you can AOI within that, so you can have 2 for instance with 1080p and you can AOI within that, but they must be the same format. And then these outputs 3 and 4 must also be the same format. You can also see here on the connectors our SDIs are now usable, and that is because the format is a standard SDI format, so that now becomes usable. So these would now copy my projector and my DSMs, so I can use either the HDMIs or I can use the SDIs. So jumping back to our projector, that's set up. The DSM is set up. The AUXes we're not using. So the next thing we might want to do is set up our multiview. So on the P series, the inputs are not movable, so you have a set of options down here that you can go with, and that is it. So here's an example. I've just put all my inputs down the bottom, and then my outputs, or my screens I should say, I can move around. So I can change the sizes of these to suit. I could, quite commonly I will go programs on top of previews, so you can move those around. So outputs or screens, you can change where they are on the multiviewer. You can't put an aux on the multiviewer. I don't know if it's going to change, but for the time being you can't see AUXes on the multiview. Before we jump into layer programming, let's also just jump into the audio side of things. So input 1 and 2, Dante output. This is a pretty, if you're used to Dante, this is a pretty standard workflow. So you basically, it's like Dante controller, except you're mapping your inputs to your Dante, and then also you can go from your Dante to your outputs. So in this example, we haven't got anything going to our outputs, but in a later example, we will patch from Dante 1, 2 into our outputs 1 and 2. So I'll do those now. There we go. So very familiar for anyone who does audio. If you're using Dante, you will know Dante controller, so therefore this is very simple. So let's jump into our programming. So our programming, basically you can click on these to not show them. And then depending on where you click here, you have different options. So when you click and it goes blue and the icon is this, that is a selected to view and also armed to take. So when you press take, that would take both screens. So for instance here, if I was to drag some content onto these screens, doesn't really matter for the time being, and I press take, it will take both. However, what I can do is I can choose to see. It's a little bit tricky to click, but you basically need to click in the grey area behind the icon, and that will show you it but not arm it, and then click on the name to arm it. So there's a little bit of a nuance to where you click. If you basically, you've got to click in this like grey area, it's a little bit tricky to see. So now for instance, if I was to arm the DSM but not arm the projector, I can press take and it will only take one of those. So there we go, and over here you have your presets. So in here you can store your presets. Your screen presets is sort of everything, and then your layer presets is specific. So I will probably deal with memories and presets in a separate video, because there's a lot going on with layer presets, because you can have selected parameters within a preset, which allows you to do quite cool things. So the other thing here is your layer stuff. So if you, for instance, click on a layer, you get a load of options here. So things to sort of be aware of is, obviously when you're trying to work on program, there's a lock, so you need to unlock it before you can do edits live on program. Cropping is a bit weird because you have to crop sort of in a backwards way, so you set the width and height of your crop and then you set your X and Y position of your crop. If you try and do X before you do the width, it won't work. And also the thumbnail in the simulator doesn't update with cropping, so it's a little bit difficult to program in a sort of offline mode. You've also got cut and fill. I will come back to cut and fill, because cut and fill affects your layer resources. You've got downstream keys, they affect your layer resources. Your border, shadow affect your layer resources. So what do I mean by layer resources? Well, when you set up your device, there is actually a layers option. So you can change your layer mode, maybe is probably way of saying it. You can also change your working mode. So we're in switcher mode, which is program preview. There is also program only mode, which I probably won't go into too much. Right, but layers. So here it says 2 main and 10 pip. So what's the difference between a main layer and a pip layer? Main layers have additional features. So a main layer allows you to do borders, which make it a main layer. A shadow makes it a main layer. And then if you use a downstream key, it makes it a main layer. And if you look here, it says layer 1. If I turn on an effect that requires a main layer, you will have an M show up next to it. And that also means it eats into your main layers. So this is a 12 layer switcher, that's 12 dual links. So a 4K is 2 dual links in terms of layer resources. If I just put my my layer here, let me actually clear this because this is not a very good way of working. So let me also clear this one. If I add my input to my preview, you'll see down here that it says I'm going to use one of my 12 resources, 0 of my 2 main resources. If I add a feature that requires the main, you'll see it choose up a main layer rather than just a standard layer. So that's the pip versus main. So we can add a border, we go into a main layer, we can add a border and a shadow. It's still only the main layer, and then if we want to add the DSK, we can also have the DSK, and that is also within that one extra bit, the main layer. That's all within making it a main layer. The cut and fill option can't be used while you've got DSK. If you try, it will give you an error message. So if we turn the DSK off and turn on the cut and fill, and then we choose a source for cut and fill, let's just use cell for a minute, you will see that it has used an additional layer. So cut and fill uses twice as many. So because this is a dual link, as soon as I add a cut and fill, I chew through another resource. So if I remove the border and the shadow, you will see that changing it from a standard to a cut and fill, not only does it double the layer count, it also makes it a main layer. So if you need to use cut and fill, be very careful about your layer counts, and we'll come back to that in a later example. But yes, that is there. So if this is a standard workflow, the only other thing I have not done here is I have not set my inputs to be 1080p. So I might set that here and then click apply. I can import and export EDIDs should I wish, however I don't. But yes, you get the picture. So I'll set all of these to 1920 1080. So other things quickly to touch on is that you can't set your input EDID for your SDIs. There's no such thing as really an EDID with an SDI. Your SDI has a format within it, and it tells the switcher what it is. There's no handshake, there's no backwards and forwards. However, you do still need to set your capacity to be dual link if you wish to use half the layer resources. So we were talking about layers. If I added an SDI that's 4K, it will chew up 2 layers. If I add an SDI that is dual link, it will only use 1 extra layer. Great, so I've got my inputs now all set to 1080p, and I'm just going to quickly show you how I might program this show. Right, so let's start programming. First thing to know is aspect ratios are not locked by default, so if you go settings, preferences, you can toggle that on and off here, so I've already got it set to on. Let's program the show. So at the moment I'm using 0 resources. I'm going to add my PowerPoint, which is on input 1. You can rename the inputs. I'm going to set it to 1 to 1, fill the screen. I'm going to take my notes, stick it on my DSM, my preview, fill that to the screen. Now I'm going to add some timer. I'm going to assume that's on input 4. It doesn't really matter. You need to drop it off the screen to create a new layer, and then you can drag it on top. And then you can resize it to do whatever you want. So for timers, I would typically also want to crop them using the input cropping. So you can see that I am using 3 of my 12 resources and 0 of my main layers because I'm not using any of those features. Next thing to do would be to save this as a preset. So make sure before you save a preset you have only selected what you want in the preset, and then I'm going to save from preview. I'm going to bind it to 1, which is like a memory. I'm going to rename it and call it PowerPoint. And then I am going to, I'll just take this, for instance, to the main screens, and then if I wanted to reload that into my program, I can. And then let's say we want to have another preset where we just have the timer and PowerPoint on the main screen. So PowerPoint on the main screen, and then timer on the DSM. So I can save that as another preset. So save from preview, and we'll call preset 2 PowerPoint -time. So then I could recall that. I can then just recall either one of those to my preview. The other thing to know that's quite interesting is that you can change which layer. So you can change the layer number. I'm not entirely sure why you might want to, but it's there, and then when you reset it will recall whichever layer that is. That's it. Yeah, if you need that, that's where it is. So that is scenario 1 pretty much covered. So we're going to quickly move on to scenario 2. So scenario 2 adds a second DSM, and it also adds a relay screen. Now let's go back to the device. We're going to add a relay screen, so we're going to add that on output 3. We've already set this to be dual link, so I just need to change my connector timing to be 1080p. There we go. So I can do that here, or I can do it from the screen output. There's 2 different ways of doing it. So let's add the relay screen. And we'll add that on the 3rd output. So there we go. And then a second DSM. So I'm actually going to use AUX1 for my second DSM, and I will explain why. So all of my inputs are going to stay the same. I'm just adding another output. So when we come to programming, we've got a relay screen. So we'll add that there. Now if I recall a preset, so PowerPoint for instance, it will automatically change what I've got selected as well. So just keep that in mind, that your recalls affects things that you have in your view. Let's to the relay screen. So we're going to add, let's say, the PowerPoint to the relay screen, and then we're going to make that bigger, and then we're actually going to save this preset over the top of the existing preset. So save from preview, we're going to stick it in 1. It's going to ask us, do we want to overwrite it? Yes, we do. And now when we recall, we have that additional screen stored. So when I say we're going to use AUX1 for our second DSM, the reason for that is our AUXes can have a screen. So I can take my projector and I can dump that onto an AUX and fill the screen. I cannot take a screen and put the screen on another screen. So screens can go to AUXes, but they cannot go to themselves. So that's why I've chosen an AUX here to be my second DSM. So what we can do is in here, I'll just rename that to be DSM2. You also can't reorder these, so they're fixed in the order they're in for now. And then if I wanted to, I can also overwrite that preset to include the AUX. So if I quickly pull my program and change that, if I now recall my PowerPoint, you can see it has recalled all 4 of my screens, and then I can take that as I wish. So that is the reason why you might want to use an AUX for a DSM rather than a screen. That also might be why you want to use an AUX for relay screens. This is very much a user by user, gig by gig choice. So that's scenario number 2. So scenario number 3, pretty much the same, except what we're going to do is we're going to have an LED wall. So we're going to have 2 of them, like a left and right set, and they're going to be 4 meters by 2 meters, 2.6mm LED. So we're 1536 by 768, both of them showing the same content. We're going to have a full HD relay. We're going to have 2 DSMs, and we're going to add in a graphics cut, and we're going to offload audio via the graphics cut as well. So the first thing to know is that the graphics cut will have to be a screen, because you can only output audio on your 4 screen. You've also got some 3.5mm jacks that you could use, but in terms of keeping everything digital, you've only got that on the screens. The AUXes do not carry audio, so that's important. Okay, so let's go back to our device, and let's go to our screens. Actually, sorry, our projector is now going to become LED. Our DSM is going to stay the same. Our relay is going to stay the same. Our DSM2 is going to stay the same. We're going to add a second, or not second, we're going to add a 4th output, screen output, which we're going to call graphics cut. And we're going to leave that at 1080p because it has to be, because it's going to have this connector added to it. And connector 4 is linked to connector 3 in terms of they share a resolution. That's the graphics cut dealt with. We can then just go to the audio. Output 47 was our graphics cut, and we would just map from Dante to the output like so. And that's now punching audio from Dante to that that connector. So back in the screens mode, let's deal with our LED being a custom resolution. So because we have linked connectors, we're actually going to be somewhat limited in how we can deal with the LED. So we can't set this to be a custom resolution because output 2, which is our DSM or relay, is also 1080p. So output 2 actually is the DSM, which is going to be 1080p. So for our LED, we have to use AOI, and that's not a problem. So down here we can set our resolution, which was 1536, and we were 768, and then we can click apply. And you can see in this little AOI window, you have what you're using is put there on the screen. So top left corner, you can move that around. So if we wanted to, we could change our X and move it around on the screen, but you're going to want it top left from almost every scenario. So programming is pretty much the same. What's left in my programmer from previous is now too big, so we're going to have to use like to fill the entire screen. Because I have the aspect locked, you can see it's kept the aspect ratio, so now we have borders, or pillars I should say on this one. So this is a case where you might actually start using the background. So the background layer you have to turn on. Okay, the background layer can only be a still. If you wanted a live background behind something, you would then drag another layer on behind. And this is where your layer orders become important. So let me just turn that background off. So obviously layer 2 is in front of layer 1. So you would have to use layer 1 in every scenario to be your background layer. And you can't obviously have two layers at the same. It just doesn't work. So that's how you would change that. And then obviously once we make that layer 1, layer 3 should be in front of that. I don't know why that's glitching in the sim. But that's how you would deal with background layers that are live. in this scenario. And then we can, let's enable our graphics cut. We can do our presets as we would normally. You also have the layer the layer preset. So for instance, you could have one that just says full screen PowerPoint. That is where you would have that, and you could have dropped that. In fact, let me just save one. So let me just save, what's this one? That's PowerPoint full screen. So let's select all the parameters, and we're going to call it PowerPoint full screen. And I'm going to click save. So layer presets need to have a layer so you can actually use them. So for instance, you create a layer with any input, and then I can drag my input, my layer preset over the top of that, and it will change my layer. So input 2 becomes input 1 full screen. That's how layer presets work. So very useful. Again, because we are quite limited in terms of how this looks on my screen, you have to sort of page between to see them all. So AUXes are interesting in the fact that you cannot create a layer that is not on the screen. So first of all, they've only got one layer. So if I remove this layer, if I drag an input to off the screen, it cannot be made. So you only can make the layer on the screen, and it cannot go outside of the screen. So if you need it to look as if it's going off the screen, you need to use the layer input crop stuff, which is in the advanced layer source crop. But once you have it to the right size, you then can use layer presets. So if I, for instance, for this layer here, if I have that set to input 2, layer preset, save, and then I can now apply that to my layer on the AUX. So a little bit nuanced, but pretty simple. Now, because of my outputs 1 and 2 having to share the same connector format, but say for instance I get rid of my DSM, say I'm going to make the choice to make that a going to choose to have my DSM on an AUX, which means I only have one layer. I now have this second connector available to be a custom format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my timing tab. You'll see it's grayed out here. That is because it is already on a screen. So once it's added to a screen, you then change it using this output mode. And in here, I'm going to go custom. And if I remember correctly, it's 1536 by 768. Click apply. So now you can see it has changed both my connectors or my outputs 1 and 2. It's also telling me I cannot use the SDI, so it's disabled those SDIs. Now for my LED, I've got a couple of options. So if I wanted to drive left and right on 2 connectors, I can quite simply add my second connector. I can bump it up to the side, it will snap very nicely. And now when I go to my programming, if I program, if I turn these other ones off, only my LEDs, you can see I have sort of the background shows me what I have. So I can set my canvas here to be to have that one, and then I can create another layer on the other side. I can tell it to fill the entire screen, and it will fill the entire screen. Now, because obviously we've got the aspect locked settings, let me show you something that gets interesting in terms of when you've got 2 connectors on one screen. So if I now tell it to fill the screen, it will do a what have I got? My layer's probably locked. There we go. So if I turn the lock off, if I tell it to fill the screen, it will do a stretch. However, it will only stretch to that one connector. If I wanted it to stretch to the whole screen, so this would be a background layer, if I drag it across the boundary and tell it to fill the entire screen, it will stretch to the entire canvas. So watch out for that one, because if you're half in, half out and press that button, it will fill the whole canvas, not just the output connector. So it's intelligently filling the entire screen, not necessarily the entire screen. So obviously you can turn the aspect lock on and off depending on what you're doing. So that's quite cool. So there we go. Oh, and it will snap to the middle of that very nicely. Great. That was two connectors side by side. There is another possibility, which is if we get rid of this second connector, we could drive both sides of the wall on one processor. So what we would do there is we would double our 1536, which is 3072. So this is still within a dual link, 3072 by 768. Apply. Yes. So now we have both of our sides as one canvas, and obviously the second connector, or the second output, now mirrors the not mirrors the first, but the format mirrors the first. And again, we can go to programming, and we can play around. And obviously now when we press fill entire screen, it will fill the entire screen because there is only one screen. There is no left and right. So that is a interesting set of options when you are dealing with LED walls, custom resolutions, that kind of thing. This next scenario would be totems either side of a projector. So the way that I've got this in my brain is I'm going to be using outputs 1 for my projector, outputs 2 for my LED, and then outputs 3 are going to be like relay, output 4 is going to be my DSM with 2 layers on it. And then I'm going to have AUXes for another DSM, and then graphics cut will have to be on an AUX, which means I lose the ability to punch audio out. So it's we're starting to get into the realms of trading things off for one another. So let's deal with the totems idea. Now within a screen you can have multiple connectors, and within those connectors you can have different AOI'd regions, so different canvases making up your canvas. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the screen. I'm going to rename this to just be my everything. It's probably not very helpful. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to change this back to be in 1080p. 1080, I can actually just choose from resolutions. So we want 1920 by 1080. Apply. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my second output here, which is going to be my LED totems. Now my LED totems I'm going to AOI. So in my LED totems I have got totems of 960 high by 384 wide, so 2 panels wide of 2.6mm, and then I think it's 5 panels high, so 960. So apply, and there you can see I've got my totem. And let's say they're doing the same thing for the time being. So I could just put that to the side, and then when it comes to programming, you can see in my background I have my totem here, and I have my my projector here, so I can fill that to the entire screen, and then I can set this one to fill the entire screen on my totem. So that's how you would deal with this sort of scenario. If I needed to have another totem over the other side, what I could do is I could add another connector, but as soon as I chew into another connector, obviously that means that that connector is now no longer available. The other option I have is I could make this double the width. So rather than AOI for 1, I could AOI for 2. So that becomes 768. And then basically in my programming tab, I would then have to be somewhat careful about how I created additional layers. So for instance, I can bump it up, use that snap to grid feature that exists. And then I can't see the side at the moment. There is a scroll wheel here. Yeah. So for instance, once my top left is actually correct, I could then just tell it what I wanted here. So it was 384 by 960. So that's how you can get around this. Obviously, this is not necessarily a particularly great way of working, but if you if this is what you needed to do, this is one way of fitting it into a P20, and it would just it would work fine. Obviously, in this scenario, we would have more inputs, so we would have, you know, camera, timer might be coming in on SDIs, and lectern feed maybe on SDI, and then we would set up another input to be so we'd set another input to be dual link. This is for our totems, for instance, and then we could set on our connector a custom resolution for its EDID. So we can go custom, and then let's say we were doing the double width one, so it would be 768 wide by 960 tall. Let's leave it at 60 for now. Yeah, there is a limitation on this. I forgot about this. There's a minimum width. There is a minimum width restriction on inputs of 800. So if I was, for instance, running this from QLab or Resolume, I would have to do some input mapping to make that work. Let's change the height though to be 960. And there we go. So yes, when we go to the programming, we would then, if we were dragging this to fill the whole screen, we would then have to change our layer size. We could change that, for instance, to be 768 by 960. We could make that the whole layer, and then we would go to our advanced layer crop, and we change this to 768. So we're essentially doing AOI on the input there, but it's done on the layer. So again, just another sort of quirk in the way that this works. Very easy to get around once you know how to do it. Scenario number 5. Scenario number 5 is going to get a little bit more interesting because we're going to have some projector blends. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our screen. I'm just going to get rid of everything I have here so far. So I'm going to go back to my device. I'm going to go to my outputs, just check they're all set to something sensible. They're all set to dual link at the moment, which is fine. Let's change output to 3. Okay, so let's deal with our outputs, and then we'll come and deal with our inputs, then we'll deal with programming. So for our screen, we're going to add a screen for our blend. So we're going to take connectors 1 and 2, or outputs 1 and 2 for our blend. So let's call this blend. And I'm going to dump outputs 1 and then outputs 2 for our blend. There's a few different ways of how we could do this. The quickest way of me doing this would be just to bump them next to each other. Now, I'm actually going to do a 3:1 blend, and there's 2 different sizes I could do. So I could either do a 1080p depth 3:1 blend, or I could do a 1200 depth 3:1 blend, and that affects my overlaps. So in 1080p mode, basically, if you go to advanced here, you can then select edge blending. You can turn it on, and then you can select your edges. So I can select this edge, and then I can go here to my quick blend mode, if you want to call it that, set it to 600, it will automatically do that, and then I can turn my feathering on and change that to be 600 also. And then I can change my gamma to suit my projectors. That's it. These are now a 2:1 blend in a 3:1 aspect ratio. So if I wanted to, I could go back to my topology, I could go to my outputs, and I could change them to be 1200 high, which is... There we go, we change that to 1200, click apply. Yes, it affects both connectors because they're part of that group. So they're now 1200 high. The SDI does not pass 1200, so just have that in mind that my 2 SDI connectors are now disabled. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag them to be... Okay. I'm just going to drag them over to be next to each other. So I have to turn it back to basic mode, because it went to advanced mode. Back to basic mode, I can choose my edges, and then for a 3:1 in 1200 deep, I believe that's a 240 pixel overlap. So turn that on, turn my feathering on if I'm doing that in my switcher, 240, there we go, done. So that's how you would change your output blends. That's how you create your blends. I'm not going to add the relays. I'm not going to add the other projector. Actually, no, let's do it. Let's add the other projector. So we're going to call this one IMAG because this might be projected at the sides. It should be 1080p. There we go. So we've got our blend, we've got our IMAG, and then we've got our DSM, and then we would also have another DSM. There we go. So we've got our blend on 2 connectors, our IMAG on 1 connector, and our DSM on another connector. Interestingly here, so for this one, we would be taking this connector for one of our blend, this connector for one of our blend. Both of these 2 connectors we might take to our 2 IMAG screens because they're showing the same, or we could take our SDI to our IMAG screens, and then output 4 would be our DSM. So again, we could take that over SDI if we wanted to. In terms of inputs, so if we were setting our input to be 3.1, we would go here and go to our EDID, change this to be custom, and 3.1 at this ratio is a dual link, so that's fine. I don't need to change that mode. So 3600 by 1200 is our 1200 is our total screen size. Change this back to 50 or 60. Click apply. And then when it comes to programming, we can see we've now got our full aspect there. So here's our screen. We can drag that on. Let's unlock it. We can drag that on, and we can set it to be full screen. And that is also 1.1 because they're the same. So that's how we would deal with 3.1 content. And then obviously dealing with PowerPoint notes is the same as before. If we had additional timer, we deal with that on DSM with 2 layers as before. We have 12 layers available, dual link, 2 of them with cut and fill. So you've got quite a lot of flexibility in this scenario to do some pretty cool stuff. Okay, moving on to a slightly more complex LED wall scenario. So we're going away from blends, we're going to go back to LED. So I am going to rename my IMAG to be Relay. It's going to be 1080p. I'm going to leave my DSMs the way they are. Graphics cut green room I'm going to do on AUXes. I don't need to name those. That's just, they're quite easy to do. I'm going to add 1 screen, and I'm going to call that LED. You'll also notice that the order here is just the order you create, and you can't change those at the moment, which is quite frustrating. So you need to create them in left to right order if that's how you want to work. And I'm going to add connector 1. This is going to be a custom res LED wall. So in here, I'm going to change this to be a custom res. I could do it on this one with an AOI, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go custom 2560 by 1536. I'm going to leave it at 60 Hertz. Again, that changes both of my outputs to be the same format. So effectively, in this scenario, I lose the option of driving output 2, unless it's something that can accept that particular format. And then obviously, again, going back to my inputs, click on my input, change my EDID. I can change it here to be 2560 by 1536. Change that to be 60 again because I'm running this one at 60. And yeah, my programming then again becomes rather simple. My LED I can click on, I can drag my content. Let's unlock the program. I can then drag my input on that's the correct resolution. I can set it to be 1.1, and I can drag it to fill the screen. In this scenario, what becomes interesting is if you drag a 1080 onto this LED wall and I set it to be 1.1. Obviously that is in the middle. That is not what I'm going to want. I'm going to want it to fill the entire screen, but that would be a stretch. So what we need to do is go back to our settings, and I'm just going to globally turn on lock aspect ratio. So here we have one that is not locked, it's unlocked, and then here we have one that is locked. so you can lock it by adding that lock there. And then if I set it to be full screen, it will full screen in the middle. So top and bottom I have some letterboxing, and this is again where I might want to use that background layer, which would be a still image. If you click here, turn it on, add a still, or I'm going to want a live background on a layer behind with another layer on top. So this is where I might do a live layer behind, drag this one on, I'm going to set it to 1, 1 in the middle. That's something I might do, or I might set this to fill the entire screen and it would be letterboxed by the background layer that is behind it. So that's the only tricky bit about doing this kind of relay. Where this becomes interesting is if I add the aux screen 2, I can now grab my screen LED and drop it to my aux, tell it to fill the screen, and you can see I've kept the aspect ratio. So I'm going to pillar box my content. So in this scenario, on my LED I have a letterbox, and then on my aux I have a pillar box. So I have pillar box my letterbox, which means I have a border all the way around. And if you wanted to get rid of that, you could do some layer cropping, which I don't think you can do on screens. So input has a crop, a screen does not have a crop. So in this scenario, you're kind of a little bit stuck. But what you could do is you could turn that aspect lock off and just fill it to the entire screen and have a stretch on your green room feed or whatever this feed is. So scenario number 7 is a 4 wide blend for an award show. So we're going to go 1200 deep with this blend by 4 projectors wide. So in this scenario, we are going to use all of our outputs to be projectors. So in my screens, I'm going to just remove all of my screens. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to name my AUXes first. So I'm going to rename my DSM 2 to be DSM 1, and then my AUX 2 is going to be DSM 2. And then in this scenario I also have some prompt going on, so we're taking prompt through the switcher. That's because it's either going to be on the screen or I'm going to be feeding prompt at stage or something else going on with the prompt. Quite often I will take prompt through my switcher because people will want prompt on the DSM as well as on their glass. So let's spell that correctly, prompt. Great, so I'm going to add one screen. Screen number 1, I'm going to call it projectors, PJs, and I'm going to dump all of my connectors on. So I had a custom EDID set to my output from before, so we're quickly going to change that in the output stage. So I'm going to change that back to 1080p. Sorry, not 1080p, 1920 by 1200 is what I want for those. And you can see it's changed the second one. Now, as soon as I add this output number 3, I should get something going on because it needs to resize those outputs, and then output 4 also. So there's my 4 outputs. I can also change them quickly to set it in 2x2 mode. There's these modes at the top, 4x1, 1x4. So here's my grid, quickly set up, and then I can just go to advanced. I can click on my edge blending, and in here I can choose my blends, so I can just choose all of them. And then I think I set this to be 600 previously for the blend width, and then obviously I can turn my feathering on and change that to be 600 also. So that's my blend set up, and if I go back to topology, I should now have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so mosaic size is 5880 by 1200, so that is exactly what I was looking for. And then again, you go back to your inputs. This is now a 4K capacity resource that I need, so I can change that back to 4K. If I was doing this, I would probably be bringing this in over dual link, DisplayPort. Yes, I would be bringing this in over DisplayPort, probably from a Mac, Mac will support this resolution. You know, the new M series will support this resolution. Anything up to 6144 is supported on the width. So that's fine. And then again, I would be looking at programming this. I can just, it appears I have not saved my input resolution. I did not set my input resolution, so let's change that. So again, custom 5880, and we are 1200 high. I'm going to set this to be 60. Apply. And in my programming, I can then just drag that onto my thing, set it to 1.1 and position it top left, and it will fill the screen. That's the same as hitting the fill entire screen. Now, when you're blending, if let me do this on the program. When you're blending, if I take my 1080p feed and I stick it on a tile, if I set it to fill entire screen, it will fill only that one. Again, if I drag it over something and tell it to fill entire screen, it will go as far as it is allowed to with the aspect ratio with the aspect ratio lock enabled. If I turn that off and tell it to fill the entire screen, it will fill the entire screen. It's a little bit weird when it comes to blends, but basically if you just drag it over any limit it thinks it has, it will then go to the next width limit. So best thing to do is just to make it roughly the right size and then hit fill screen, and it will fill it out to the borders if you need to. You will also notice that in this scenario, so in this top one, input 2, which is a dual link resource, is only using one of my resources, and this one down the bottom, input 1, is a 4K signal, so 4K resource, and it is using 2 layers, so 2 dual link layers make up my one 4K layer. So this is where we start getting into things getting a little bit interesting. So what I'm going to do is, in this scenario, let me just match the program on preview. There we go. Very useful button, this one, match program, which copies everything from your program to your preview so you can work on it. In this scenario, what would be very typical is, I might have some sort of PowerPoint in the middle, my award show, with a live moving background, and then I might have cameras left and right. So in here, so we have a dual link. This is where my camera would be coming in. I'm not going to use, I should have done that, I should do this, sorry. I'm not going to use this for the example because you can't set the connector to be 1080p in the simulator. So I'm just going to grab this one to be my cameras. Again, drop it off the screen to make the layer, and then I can put it on the screen and put it where I want it. I'm going to set it to be 1.1, so nice big camera. And then if I just pop it there, do the same the other side. This should be a very common sort of thing to do. There we go. And then that gives me a space in the middle where I might drop a PowerPoint. Now this could be a 1080p PowerPoint, or it could be something a little bit more custom. So there you go, there is 3 pips over the background. Now in this scenario, I might want to do cut and fill. So I might want to have a nice border. Let's get rid of that. I might want to have a nice border around my cameras, so I could turn on my cut and fill. Be very careful here because again, we are using those main layers. Okay, and then obviously I can choose my cut and fill source here. So that's all good. I could also crop these down to be squares. I do this quite a lot when I'm working with camera iMag things. I might drop those down to be squares, put a nice border around them, and that frees up a bit more real estate on this kind of canvas. So if this one's 1080 as well. So you can just assume that I've cropped these so they're nice and not doing people's heads. This one in the middle, I then might make a 3:1, so I might change this to be 3240 by 1080. Again, turn the aspect ratio lock off for a minute by 1080, and this would be a 3:1 input source, so 3:1 PowerPoint. on a live background, and then cameras either side with cut and fill. So I'm starting to chew into my resources with this kind of setup. You can see I'm using both my main resources, and I'm sort of using 7 of my 12 layer resources that are available because of those cut and fill requiring additional resources. So everything here from this point on is the same as the other ones. You can store and save your presets and recall them as such. So that is a 4 wide blend for an award show. So the next one is quite a large LED wall. So we're going to go for a 12 meter wide by 4 meter high 2.5mm pitch LED wall. So that's 4800 by 1600. We're going to have some relay feeds, we're going to have some DSM feeds, we're going to have prompt feeds. So it's almost the same as the previous example, except rather than 4 wide projector, we're going to drop that out and we're going to have some LED instead. So go back to my screen. So I'm just going to remove my projector screens completely. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to add... so I'm going to leave the names for DSM1, DSM2 and prompt for the time being. It doesn't really matter. Let's add my LED. So call this one LED. And in my output mode, I need to change my connector to be 4K. So we're going to chew up connectors 1 and 2 for this to be my LED. I'm going to drive this over one connector. This is going to be into a Nova Star processor. This would not work into Brompton. So go back to my screen. You can see it's defaulted to UHD as its resolution, and then in here I could set this to be custom. So I'm going over my 4K width limit because I'm going up to 4800, and then I'm going to change my height to be 1600, and because of that I can now set it back to 60 Hz, and that's fine. It also affects connectors, everything within the screen, so connectors 1, 2, etc. These connectors now duplicate these connectors, and this would be on opticals 1 and 2 if I was driving it that way into a Nova Star processor. SDI becomes disabled because I'm custom resolution. So that's how I set up my nice big canvas. Again, going back to my inputs, I would probably be bringing this in on DisplayPort, but in here I can change my basic mode. I need to change the block to be 4K. Well, it already is, that's fine. Change my connector, change my EDID, custom, and I would be 4800. That's not going to work. 4800. Give it a second to update by 1600. Sorry, 1600. And that's fine. So apply that, and then programming is the same as previous. You can drag, drop, fill the entire screen. So in this scenario, I would be having a live background, which is fine. That's one connector. Don't need to do anything with multiple connectors in this example. And then I would be dropping over the top some other things. So drop off the screen, obviously, and then put them on screen. Make it 1:1. So this might be my camera feed. I think last time I did this job, the lectern was over sort of this side. So they had a camera relay over the other side, and then obviously in the middle there was people getting up taking pictures, and halfway through we went from this as an output to this as an output, where what we had in the middle was actually a PowerPoint that had the name of the award winner behind them. So we had cameras, and then we switched to, when they took the photo, we switched to just an award like name in the middle, so that it was in the back of the photos. So again, very simple. And then obviously we have only used outputs 1 and 2 for this LED wall because we're only using this connector, but it uses both because we've got it in 4K mode. So I would then have my relay on output 3, my DSM with 2 layers on output 4, and then anything else would have to be on an AUX with only 1 layer. That's this scenario really. It's not particularly that complicated, other than the fact that the output size is wider than 4K. So I could also, if I was using Brompton processing for this, so Brompton processing has a 4096 width limit, I could basically split this down the middle and drive it as 2 dual links. So I'll quickly show you how I would do that, because this is a very useful scenario. Maybe you haven't got a or maybe you have a different Novastar 4K processor, or a different Novastar processor that can't take a 4K signal. Most of them can, certainly all the new ones can. So what we could do here is go back to our screen settings, and in screen 1, again it's changed it to be our default dual link. We can add connector 2. We can go up here and set them to be 2:1 aspect thing, and in here we can change our individual outputs. So 4800 would be 2400 wide, and then we can set our heights to be, what is it, 1600. At 60, that's fine. Click apply. This will apply to both. Blah blah blah. And there we go. That's the same LED wall. So in this mode, we've got output 1, output 2, which is one canvas. We can still use our input, that's the 4K input, over the 2 dual link outputs if we were using different processing that required that kind of scenario. So it's useful to know that that is just literally how quick it is to make that change should you need to on site. Great, and then obviously programming from this point on is the same as all of the others. Yeah, okay, so let's move on to another LED wall example. This one is quite a long LED wall, so it's almost exactly this scenario where we've got 2 connectors. So if I go back to screen, so in this scenario we're going 20 meters long by 2.5 meters high, 2.6mm LED wall, so 7680 by 960. And what we're going to do is in our output side, we're going to change this to be 3840 by 960. And I'm going to run it at 60 Hertz because I can. Yes. And there we go. It's made those changes. Now, again, on the input side of things, I'd probably be driving this over DisplayPort just because it's a little bit more stable. But I can do this over HDMI into a P20. Now, the caveat here is that wider than 4K is not necessarily supported on all HDMI devices. So your laptop that has HDMI may not support this format on the output. However, DisplayPort it will, as long as you have a graphics card in that supports, custom formats and stuff like that. So Intel integrated graphics does not support this, for instance. So 7680 wide by 960, so 960. And again, I can set that to 60 if I so wish, because I can. And almost exactly like the last one, I can just drag that on, and then I can tell it to be 1:1, and then fill the screen. Yeah, there we go. Now, in this scenario, the last time I think I did this wall, I needed a little bit more than 2 main layers. Now, let me explain. Last time I did this, I actually had 2 1080p HDMI feeds for PowerPoints, and I'm just going to drop these on. It's not going to be a particularly nice lineup for the time being. So I had those 2. Now, each one of these required a border and a drop shadow. So I'm not going to tweak the settings for my drop shadows, but I'm just going to add them. So I had borders and drop shadows. Now, earlier on I discussed the additional resources used by borders and drop shadows. Borders and drop shadows mean they are main layers. Now, this has still got plenty of layers left. Okay, so if I wanted to drop a PowerPoint in the middle, I could. So I think last time I did this, what we had PowerPoints either side with drop shadows and borders, and then in the middle somewhere we actually had a name tag. Now that name tag was a chroma keyed PowerPoint, so it was a green background with the name in black in the middle, and we plonked that in the middle, and that came on and off separately to everything else. So it was on like a memory recall for just that layer. This scenario would not work because if I want the downstream key, maximum main layer reached is what would what would happen. So to get around this, we actually have to go back to device, and this is when we have to change our layers to be 4 main and 4 pip. And this is a destructive move, by the way, so don't do this mid-show. If I now go back to my programming, you'll see my programming is gone.
So let me just quickly recreate my programming. So entire full screen, PowerPoint, and then a PowerPoint. Drop these on screen. I don't need DSK for that. I want border, and then I want drop shadow. Border, shadow, and yeah, you can see my resources. Oh, click there. Whoops. And then if I wanted to add my let's add it from connector 3. If I wanted to add in the middle my thing, I can do so. There we go. And then in here I can change my DS key to be chroma. And there we go, I've got my name slates in the middle. So again, I'm changing my mode to gain that extra main layer just to make better uses of resources. So yeah, that's the resources on this one. A little bit more complicated, obviously more layers, more things going on. Obviously changing that mode to be 4+4 rather than 10+2. So you still have it's still really the same amount of resources, they're just allocated slightly differently, and obviously you can't then have 12, it's not dynamic, this is a thing you do once, you do it before your show starts, and then you need to program everything while you're in this mode, otherwise things will get a bit weird. So that's this. That's kind of it for this example. I just want to show that change, that key configuration change that enables this particular example to be doable within this switcher. Now, the last scenario. This last scenario is potentially the uppermost limit of what you would get away with the P20. So I'm just going to go back to screen. I'm just going to delete this LED for the time being. I'm going to leave my DSM 1 to prompt AUXes. Don't really, not concerned about what they're called. They exist. You can't get rid of them. They always exist. So this particular example, this would be a 20 meter by 3.5 meter, 2.5 millimeter LED wall with full HD projection relay for iMac either side. Two of them may be showing the same thing, and then 2 DSMs, a green room feed, and a graphics cut. Now, this is a very limiting example. We've already discussed that we can't get on an aux, we can't have audio, so our graphics cut doesn't have audio with it. So if we're passing audio off to our recorder or a vMix person or whatever the graphics cut is going to, we have to get audio to them a different way. That may or may not be a make or break thing for you, but that's a limitation of this switcher, and that's a limitation. Also, the 20 meter by 3.5 meter, that has been specifically chosen such that our canvas size fits within one connector. This canvas size only fits in at 50, it does not fit in at 60. So the way around that would be to start going into multiple connectors. Signals with multiple connectors means obviously you need more connectors to do things like your background layers. So things get a little bit more complicated. As far as I know, this doesn't support DisplayPort tiling, so you're going to have to stitch layers together if you wanted to go to multiple connectors as your route. So this is quite a limiting scenario. So first of all, let's set up our LED wall. Now, I'm going to choose to do this on one connector, but you could do two connectors butted up as we did previously. If you're using Brompton, you would need to do it over two connectors. If you're using Novastar, you can do it over one, assuming your processors support it. So, for instance, I know that you could go into a Novastar 4K processor, the MCTRL. Let's change the output to 4K. Again, we're going to lose the second connector, the second output block. That's fine. We're going to leave our other set to be two lots of dual link. So this would be our relay and one of our DSMs. We're going to go back to our screen, and screen 1, we're going to change our output to be custom. We're going to change it to be 8000 wide, and we're going to change it to be 1400 high. Now you can see this has dropped the frequency right down. If I set this to 60, it will go to the highest it possibly can do, 51.27. Obviously, that's not frequency you're going to run at, so change it to 50. We're going to click OK, and there's our LED. So this is quite a wide LED, 20 meters by 3.5. If this was flown, this is what you might see above a stage in like a 3000 capacity auditorium kind of thing. Okay, so that's that. We can add our relay screen. We can add our DSM. So screen 2 would be, let's name these relay. And screen 3 would be our DSM. There we go. So screen 1, relay screen, would be this one. I'm going to change this to be 1080p. And obviously our DSM is therefore also 1080p, which is fine. So you'll also note that I'm running my main LED at 50, and I'd be running, in this example, I'm currently running my relay at 60. That is obviously not necessarily what you would want to do, but it's there. And again, going back to our inputs, I'd probably be doing this over DisplayPort, but if I had you know, a P4000 or higher graphics card, NVIDIA Pro Series that supported custom resolutions, and also you know, was relatively easy to program, I can change this to be 1400. I can change this to be my custom resolution, and it would be fine. 50. So again, these kind of wider than 4K resolutions get a bit tricky. Best to do them over DisplayPort. You can't do this from an M series Mac, but you can do this from a Windows box with a suitable graphics card inside it. So again, we go back to programming. I can grab my input and I can just drop it on my screen, fill it to the whole screen, job done. Now, it's used, obviously I'm in 4+4 modes, it's used 2 of my 8 layers. Now, last time I did a wall like this, the requirements for my layers were actually a little bit more complex than a lot of jobs I do. So for instance, we have, didn't want to do that, let's do this again. We had a camera pip either side, so I'm just going to drop those on for the time being. Camera pip either side. And then we had underneath it, we had captions. Again, we had captions on both sides, so I'm going to drop captions here, I'm going to drop captions on the other side, like so. And then we had a you know, a widescreen PowerPoint in the middle. So I'm just going to drop that here. Now, this is a 4K, obviously, input 7 is 4K. Now, you can see here in this mode, I have chewed up all of my 8 layers. I could go back to my other mode and have 12 layers, but with, well, 10+2. At the moment, I've got 4+4. So this is at the limit here of what this one could do. Now, when I last did this, we actually did use cut and fill. So we put borders, we put an input mask and a border around our cameras. Now, in this scenario, I can't do that because I don't have enough layers. In the other mode, the 10+2, I could put that around, I could put cut and fill around my cameras, but I couldn't do it around my captions. So the other thing here is my captions have DSK. So we did Luma keying on the captions actually for this one. But again here I can't have cut and fill because my cut and fill requires an extra layer. So not only is it a main, it also requires an extra layer. So what I can do in this scenario is make some decisions around how things are going to be run. So the only thing here is how many of my layers I'm dealing with cut and fill for. So the other interesting thing here is what we could actually do is do a cut and fill across the whole graphic rather than just across the camera. So rather than do cut and fill on our layers, we could send these layers behind and put another layer over the top that had holes in, and then we could make the holes transparent by using the DSK. So that's a way around this, but it gets more complex. I could also not do DSK on my captions. So I could just crop these down and have them in boxes and then put borders around the boxes in my background layer. Again, this is in the realm of I'm now making choices because I'm trying to fit it in the switcher rather than just, you know, doing what I would normally do, which is put them on screen, DSK, done. So this is a very limiting example of this switcher, and whether it's in the 4+4 mode or the 10+2 mode, either way I have to make compromises if I wanted to do this kind of background, so, or this kind of layup of layers. So you know, 4K background plus camera pips with cut and fill plus captions with DSK plus a 4K in the middle stretched to whatever size it needs to be is a tad beyond the capability of the P20. You can do it, but you have to make compromises, and that is very much a case of this is where you really want to move up to the Q8 switcher rather than being in a P series switcher. So yes, that's scenario number 10. It's kind of the very, very limit of what this switcher could potentially do with a load of caveat. Let's go to program only mode. So in program only mode, yes, it's destructive, so you don't want to do this mid-show, obviously. You still have the option of your main versus pip layers. I'm going to go back to the 12, the 10+2 layers, so you get 12 possible. And then in screen, I'll just quickly throw through this. So I need to change this all to 4K mode. That's done it for me. Still knows for me. Yeah, great. Let's go to screen, screen number 1, and I can go for. Let's go 4 wide, 1x4. If you use the tiling thing at the top, you don't necessarily have to have your inputs added before you create your areas. So I'll quickly add these here like this. Done. And then if I go to programming, you will see that I have I only want screen 1. You can see that I have a quite a large canvas, which is 15,000 by 2,000. Again, we're program only mode, so if I wanted to start dropping stuff on, I can do so. I can set them to 1:1, so I might have 4 background inputs coming from media servers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and here I'm stitched them together by layer, which is interesting. So again, fill entire screen. If it's just on one screen, it fills just that output space. If it's across a boundary, it fills the whole screen, or across the boundaries, the bounding limits, if you want to call it that. And then, for instance, 5, this might be a pip. I might want to have a pip there that moves across the thing throughout the day. And then this is the last layer. So I could have 6 4K layers across my 4 4K outputs. That is just because these are... Oh, should have done that. These are 4K, so they take up 2 dual link resources per layer. But I could, for instance, use 8 dual link resources for my backgrounds, and then I could have 4. I could use so if I change input 8 to be dual link, then go back to my screen. Sorry, my programming. I can. I should now have some more available. So I can change my. If I put that to be input 8, there you go. So I can now get a couple more. A couple more dual link only inputs. So I can have that one there, and I got one more that I could use as well. So I got one more. There we go. And again, 2 of these I could make main. So I could, for instance, have DSK on one. And use that as a ticker across the bottom of some of the screens or whatever. I can also change my output timing, so in screen I could change my output of all of these 4Ks to be something custom. So I could, for instance, take them to 8096, is it? By in fact, let me just leave this as 2K high. Okay, there we go. So running it down at 30, I can make an even bigger canvas, should I wish to, which is 32,000 by 2,000. So we really are talking quite a lot of pixels. Where this might be useful is if you've got a large LED wall, let's say you're walking into an airport. I'm not sure what this would be. In fact, let me quickly calculate that. That would be a very large canvas. So we are talking 32,000, 32,384. We're talking like an 80 meter wide LED canvas at quite a fine pitch. So there's lots of possibilities in program only mode, but obviously you don't get a preview. So this is only really for sort of program while we're offline and then we're back online kind of thing. Programmed only shows. There is no fading to things, so you would have to be very careful about what you use this for in program only mode. Anyway, I think I've touched on more than I initially anticipated, so I think I'm going to stop here. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I will do some other videos in the future around other specifics of Pixelhue switches. Thanks for watching.